My name is Jack Earl Martin.
Earl Martin. And what is your birthday, sir?
My birthday is April 6, 1947.
And where were you born?
I was born in Detroit, Michigan on a Easter Sunday.
Oh.
And they were having a flood that day, and my parents had an old Model A car, and it was real high, so it got through the water and got to the hospital okay. So that was their story.
But you consider as the Wisconsin as your home state, right?
Yes.
Tell me about it, please.
Well, my parents moved back and forth between Michigan and Wisconsin several times when I was a youth.
Uh-huh.
And I did most of my childhood in the state of Wisconsin, so I consider that home.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got out of the service, I ended up moving to Wyoming, and I've been here for 49 years.
49 years.
Yes.
Beautiful city.
Yes, we love it here.
Mm-hmm. Air is crispy, and
Yes.
the weather is really, really favorable to, you know.
Yeah, most of the time, 98% of the time, it's nice weather here.
But do you have a heavy winter here?
No, it's pretty mild. We're in a high desert here,
Uh-huh.
and the mountains are just a couple miles away from our town, and the snowstorms usually stop right at the mountains, so we usually have nice weather right here.
Very good. First of all, I have to mention that my foundation is doing this oral history project for the Korean War veterans, and because it's imperative to have their direct witness about the war that has been known as Forgotten War. And thanks to your arrangement, I was able to do beautiful interviews here. Would you please talk a little bit more about your chapter here and your role as a president?
Okay. Well, first off, I would like to say thank you for what you're doing, and I really appreciate it, and I think it's very good for our country and your country, because if people forget history, they don't know how to approach the future, because they can learn from their mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're doing a wonderful job there.
Thank you.
I got involved with the Korean War Veterans Association. I was at a spring garden show they were having here in town, and the Korean War Veterans had a booth set up.
When was it?
Oh, I can't, it's quite a few
Just
years ago, but I was walking by and I knew the guys that were running the booth, so I stopped to visit with them because we were all veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to talking, and they said, well, why don't you join our organization? And I said, well, I wasn't a Korean War veteran, I was just a Korean veteran. And they said, well, that's fine. We accept all Korean veterans in our organization. So I joined their organization, and I found them to be a wonderful group of gentlemen. I just love them to death. They're kind of like having a bunch of uncles, because they're a little older than me, you know, and they're just wonderful people. They work hard. They care about everybody. They get along very well with themselves, and so it was fun being involved with them. And as they got older, we started losing a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And the ones that were the leaders of the organization are in their late 80s, early 90s now. And it was hard for them to do a lot of things. So my friend Dennis McGarry that you interviewed yesterday, and myself, we took over. I'm the president and he's the secretary-treasurer. And we don't do as much activity as we did when we were building the Veterans Park and stuff like that. We were very busy then, and it was an everyday project, you know, for quite a while, doing fundraisers plus all the construction work and everything. But we put together a pretty nice little park for a small town, we think.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the governor of the state of Wyoming was so impressed with it that he declared it the Wyoming Veterans State Park. So we were pretty proud of that.
So that Veterans Park, I was there is Wyoming State Veterans Park.
Yes, it is.
That's an honor.
Yes, it is. And so we're very proud of that accomplishment. And as you toured it, you noticed we had monuments for World War II, World War I, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the War on Freedom that's going on right now, plus a lot of smaller individual ones. We recognize the Korean people. They helped us tremendously financially put that park together. And a couple of the special operation units have monuments there. So yeah, we're very proud of it. And the city of Cody took over the maintenance of the park. And so that works very nice because we put it together and they maintain it. And then if in the future, if other things develop that need to be honored, we will get involved again and keep it going.
Mm-hmm. I have a few questions about, you said you are a Korea defense veteran, and
Yes.
so could you elaborate on what do you mean by Korea defense veteran?
Well, as you well know, that never got settled. It never finished, so it's kind of like a police.
You mean the Korean War?
Yes. And your country is very important to our country because it's right in the middle of everybody that doesn't seem to get along. And so it's a very important location for us to help keep an eye on our, I don't know if you want to call them enemies, but countries with different opinions on how things should be. And so, yes, I think it's sad to think that we have to be there for 70 years,
Mm-hmm.
but we're in almost every country in the world anyhow. We're the kind of country that tries to help the world. Sometimes we actually cause more trouble than we solve, but as you know, I mean, part of the Korean problem was us. And anyhow, we're just all over the world trying to help things. And Korea has been a very good ally to the United States. And the Korean War veterans, our group here in Wyoming, they're a very proud group of men. And they look at Korea kind of like their second country or second home, you might call it, because they fought. None of the guys I'm involved with died there, but they had friends that did, and it's very close to their heart, and it really makes us have a warm feeling to see how wonderful you guys have built your country to the 11th.
Largest economy, yes.
Economy in the country.
In the world.
In the world, I mean, and to think it's so small to have a title like that is amazing. And when I left there in '66, I could never imagine that country growing like that because it was so poverty-stricken at that time.
Still, even after the war.
Oh, yes. I was there 13 years after the war, 12 and 13 years after the war. And it saddened me to see a country so poor. I didn't realize, and that was the first country I'd ever went to outside the United States, other than Canada, because they're right across the border. But and Mexico, I'd been in Mexico, but just across the border. And so when I landed in Korea, it was quite an education because I just had turned 18 years old.
Mm-hmm. That was 65?
In '65.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in May of '65, we went over on a ship. We came back on a plane, and it was a 17-day boat ride to get there. And it stopped in Hawaii and it stopped in Japan, and then we stopped in Incheon, Korea. And they unloaded us onto landing crafts and took us to the beach on landing crafts. And it was quite an eye-opener to see a country struggling so hard at that time. And war is a terrible thing. And then when you see the after effects and how long it takes to recover, and so I guess what you have to think about is how long a country has been in existence, and now 70 years after a war, they're doing wonderful. That seems a long time to an individual, but to a country, 70 years probably is a long time.
Mm-hmm. You told me a very sad example how poor the Korean people at the time when you arrived in Incheon and on the way to your the bases. You experienced something really awful there, right? Could you share that with our audience, please, again?
Well, immediately when we got there, it was lunchtime, so they gave us a sack lunch, told us to get on the train, take a seat, eat your lunch, and throw the garbage bag out the window into a 55-gallon drums that lined up along the track. And so we did, and when you throw your garbage bag out, you look out the window to make sure you hit the garbage can. And what we saw was dozens of little starving children diving headfirst into those garbage cans after our scraps to see if we left anything in our lunch bags. And it just shocked us. I mean, my friend Dennis and I were sitting together. That's the day we met. And we both come from rural towns like this, that people in these small communities take care of each other. Even if there's a hungry family in this town, we make sure they get fed, And to see that, it was just a shock, And then as we went through the villages, it didn't get any better going along. And then when we got to the north part, it was even worse than it was down south. And so then when we walked through the villages, the little children would come up and pull on our pants legs, and we didn't know what they were saying, but you could tell they were asking for food.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shocked us. It was really an eye opener. And the older people would be standing there, barely being able to stand up. They were so hungry. And the kids would go, and if you had anything to eat, they would go back and share it with their elders. And it was sad,
mm-hmm.
And when I first got there, I thought, well, first off, their fishing industry in Incheon, they hang it on fences and stuff out in the sunlight, and it stunk really bad. And Dennis and I both we had our hankies over our faces.
Because of the fish smell.
Yeah, fish smell, yeah. And I thought, oh my goodness, we were supposed to be there 13 months, and I thought I'll never make it for 13 months. It smelled so bad, but after a couple of weeks there, you get used to it. You don't think much about it, and you get used to seeing the starvation and stuff. There was only so much you can do about it, we didn't have a bunch of food to carry down to the villages and stuff from our bases.
Have you been back to Korea since your...
No, I have not, but there was a lot of Korean school teachers that came over to our area here in Cody and
to learn English more.
To learn English, and they put on a presentation for us at the college one night. It was a big show of Korean dance and music, and they showed video of your country today, and it was quite amazing. We were really surprised, and they did that show as a thank you for our help. And since I've been involved with the Korean War Association, there's been several Korean people that have came to Cody and did special things for our organization as a thank you. And in just a couple weeks ago, I got 20 cases of face masks from South Korea to help with this pandemic that's going on in our country and the world. And I thought that was pretty amazing, because at that time there was a shortage of everything. And so that was a very nice gesture.
Mm-hmm. You know, you arrived in Korea 65, which is 12 to 13 years later, the end of the Korean War, which wasn't replaced by the peace treaty. It was just ceasefire.
Right.
And still, children's in the streets just starving and looking for anything to eat. It's shocking to know.
Yes.
But that country become now 11th largest economy, as you mentioned in the beginning, and they are giving aids to the countries so that they know how terrible it was for them to begging for the food, and they are doing back to them. I think this is wonderful story, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's nice to know that. I actually didn't know about the aid to other countries. It's almost like a fairy tale story because of what I saw, over 50 years ago. To know that a country can pull itself up like that and be successful, and that's very nice. And the Korean country has been probably the most grateful country to the United States of any country we've helped in history. I can't think of another country that's shown their gratitude like Korea has. And so I have to say thank you for that. That is very appreciated by us.
That's very nice. By the way, I'm U.S. citizen, but originally born in Korea. But if you look at the long history of Korea over 5,000 years, you can see that the Republic of Korea as it is now, is the highest point in our history in terms of democracy, the political freedom that they enjoy and they demand, and also economic well-being, So I think we have to be really mutually recognizing for what's been done to each other. Let me clear, the Korea Defense Veteran is different from Korean War veteran, but because, as you mentioned, war has never been really officially ended, so that you are the successor of the Korean War veterans, right? So since armistice of July 27 of 1953, there has been U.S. forces all the time, on average about 30,000 men and women.
Right.
War been there in Korean Peninsula, southern part of it, and to protect the freedom for the world and as well as Koreans. So you are the Korea Defense Veteran.
And I think when I was there, I think there was about 50,000 of us there at that time.
Yes.
And there was a lot of little bases all over your country. And I think the base that I was on was
Camp Rice.
Camp Rice, and I think I've looked it up on the internet, and there was a lieutenant that did a documentary of that base in 1968, and it then got turned over to the Korean people to take care of, and I think since then it even got taken apart. I don't think it even exists anymore, but I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
But
that will be very, very interesting if we can find that. And
yes, and I had a friend that I was in Korea with that lives in Wisconsin, and we had stayed in communication for many years, and then after I moved to Wyoming, we lost touch. And many years went by, and one day he found me on the internet, and he called me up. And so since then, we've been seeing each other every year, and he's the one that told me to go on the internet and pull that up. And
did you find the clip there?
I did find it, and I can't quite remember what it was, but I think if you can just pull up on the internet in 1968, and this lieutenant, and he went and filmed all the different bases in Korea
Did you see all of it from
I
internet?
saw all of the bases.
So it's
yeah.
still there in the internet.
Well, it was the last time I looked, yes.
When was it?
Well, it's been now a year or two ago, but I'm sure you can still pull it up.
Okay.
But it showed all the different bases, and it had a picture of our base, and it was pretty interesting. I watched it a couple times, and I can't remember what he told me to pull up.
What's his name?
His name was Calvin Sorensen in Wisconsin.
No, I mean the lieutenant who did the documentary.
I can't remember that.
Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back to your. You born in Detroit, but you moved to Wisconsin. And where did you finish the high school?
I went to high school in Coleman, Wisconsin.
I'm sorry?
Coleman, Coleaeman,
Coleman.
Coleman, Wisconsin.
What is the name of high school? Coleman?
Yes, Coleman High.
When did you graduate?
I was class of 65.
65. You graduated in 1965.
Yeah.
Did you know anything about Korea?
Actually, I did not graduate in 65. I dropped out of school in 64, and I joined the Army
Uh-huh.
in 64. And then after I got out of the Army, I went back at night and finished school at night.
Wow, that's an
Yeah.
accomplishment.
Yeah, and then I did take a few college classes, but I don't have any degree in anything. I just took some college classes. So, but yeah, when I was young, I was ready to go adventure the world, and I wasn't old enough really, but I took off anyhow. And
Yeah, that was a good opportunity for
Yes.
many American,
so I joined the Army as soon as I turned 17. That's as young as you could get in.
hmm
And
But did you know anything about Korean War? Did the teacher or your school teach about Korea?
you know, I wasn't the best student in the world, so I don't want to say that they didn't teach anything about Korea, but I don't remember.
And it didn't
Anything about
it
Korea.
didn't bell the ring.
When I was in the Army, I got stationed after I did my schooling. I got stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I was working as a tank mechanic. And every Monday morning, we would have a formation, and they would tell people they pulled new orders to go different places. And usually there'd be about 10 sets of orders every Monday morning, and about eight of them would go to Vietnam, and about 2 of us would get sent to either Korea or Europe. And one morning they called my name and they said, "You're going to Korea." And one other guy that I was stationed with got sent to Korea. And when they said Korea, that's like the first time I ever heard that word. It seemed like I probably heard it before that, but I never paid any attention to it until they said I was going there.
Did you want to go to Europe or Vietnam rather than Korea?
Yeah.
Which country, which region was your?
You know, I did not have any desire to go. I thought I would probably get sent to Vietnam. That's where I figured I'd end up. But where I was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, it was a very nice place to be, and I was happy there. If they'd left me there, it would have been fine. But I was stationed in 5 different places in 3 years that I was in the Army.
But at least you didn't go to the war of Vietnam. Rather, you went to Korea, so
Right.
safer.
Right. And you know, when I was young, I was ready to try anything, okay? And I wasn't afraid to go to war. And so after I came back from Korea, I volunteered to go to Vietnam. But I didn't have enough time left. I had 9 months left in my hitch, and they told me I would have to extend or re-enlist or to go overseas again. And so they wouldn't let me, and I didn't want to stay in the Army, so I got out. But,
So, do you remember the date that you enlisted to the Army?
yes, I actually enlisted in April 29th of 1964.
And where did you went to Fort Knox to get the basic?
No, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Fort
Leonard Wood.
L-E?
Leonard, I think, Leonard.
Leonard Wood.
Wood, yeah.
Where?
Missouri.
Missouri. And you got that basic military training.
Yes.
And then you went to Fort Knox for the tank.
No, then I got sent to Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I went to school. And they trained me in fuel and electric systems repair, but I didn't really care for that. And when I got done with schooling, I didn't have any orders to go anyplace, so I went down the street from where I was stationed at the school, and there was a motor pool that fixed tanks. And I asked that sergeant there if I could work for him while I was waiting for orders. So every morning I'd go down there, and he taught me how to work on tanks. So then I got orders to go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I got there. They asked me what my MOS was, and I said fuel and electric systems, and he said, "Oh, no, not another one of those." He said, "We got too many of those." And I said, "Well, what would you rather my MOS be?" And he said, "I sure could use a tank mechanic."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Hey, that's what I've been doing, and I like that better." So I worked on tanks, and I like driving them and stuff. They were fun. And you know, tanks are big and heavy, and a lot of people would think that that's just terrible to work on, but they're so heavy that you have to use equipment to lift things and stuff. So it's really not that hard to work on a tank.
Uh-huh.
Because you don't lift the part up and put it on a tank. You have to use something to lift it because it's heavy. And so I enjoyed working on tanks. But then when I got sent to Korea, then I ended up back in my fuel and electric systems MOS.
Okay. So, what was your unit in Korea?
The 702nd
702nd.
Maintenance Battalion
Mm-hmm.
and the 2nd Infantry Division
Maintenance Battalion and
on Camp Rice is where we were stationed.
yeah, the Maintenance Battalion and then regiment.
You know what? I don't remember it doesn't say in this book. It just says 2nd Infantry Division.
2nd Infantry Division.
And you know, 702nd Maintenance Battalion. So I don't know about the regiment.
Got it. And you were private?
I was a PFC when I got there, and then I was promoted to specialist.
And tell me about the situation at the time you were there when did you arrive actually?
In the first...
May of 1965.
Yes.
Yeah.
Early
How was the situation in DMZ area? Were there any heightened situation between North Koreans and us, or?
Well, you know, they argued all the time, and we would, you know, we got a Korean military channel on the radio, and so we could listen to our generals argue with their generals, and it was all propaganda. And actually, it was you know what they did is, we would accuse them of maybe 5 violations, and they would accuse us of dozens and dozens of violations that I don't know if either side did, but they would accuse each other. And they stayed on their side and we stayed on our side. And my very first detail I got stuck on when I got in my new company there was to take orphans up into the DMZ zone and cut timber for so they could build more housing for the kids. And there was no military in the zone part.
Right.
That was off limits to us.
Yeah.
And there was one village up there they called Freedom Village. And those people lived free. I mean, I guess your government just provided for them, or maybe our government did, I don't know who. And then on the North Korean side, I did go to Panmunjom and on a visit one day just to see it. And on their side, they had a freedom village, but it was false. It wasn't free. It was a stage they built, and I don't know if that still exists or not.
Still there.
They trucked people in every morning early, had them walk in the streets like they were free, and then they went home at night wherever they trucked them out again. And it was a big fake stage. A whole village was only fronts of stores. There was no stores, just like a stage prop. And I thought they thought we actually fell for that, And we did visit with the North Korean soldiers, my friend and I that went up there. We didn't talk much Korean, whatever we learned, just running around in the villages, but we could communicate roughly. And they didn't talk English, so we just communicate in Korean and a little bit of English. They knew about as much English as we knew Korean, I guess. And so we could communicate. And then there was the Turkish army was over there. They had a base not too far from ours. And one friend that I used to run around with, him and I became friends with the Turkish soldiers. And they didn't talk English and we didn't talk Turkish, so we talked Korean a little bit to communicate, because they were just like us. And they pretty much stayed to themselves. They didn't communicate with us or your soldiers that I am aware of. And they were pretty hardcore guys. They weren't warm people. But my friend and I, we got along very good with them, and they actually took us to their base and fed us. And when they fed us, they sat and watched us eat. And they piled our plate full of food, and they just sat and watched us eat. They wouldn't eat with us. They wanted to serve us.
You mean Turkish?
Turkish soldiers. And it was very different, I can't ever say I was really comfortable around them, because I think if you made them mad, they'd just slit your throat, I mean, they were that kind of people, But the Korean people were very scared of them.
Yeah, my foundation has about 50 Turkish veterans interview. I was there in Ankara, Izmir, and Istanbul, and they are different breed of veterans, but they are very friendly, very passionate, very emotional. So I love them every minute that I spend with them. But so in terms of, there has been some sort of verbal accusations against each other, but over the DMZ and over the period that you were there in Korea, there was not really military provocations or any heightened relations in terms of militarily.
Yeah, we would go out on field training missions, and one week, and I think this was at what they call the Second Korean War. I think this was the very front edge of it, but there was a few North Koreans that came across, and so we went on high alert. And up to that point, they never gave us any ammunition. When we went on guard duty, we had empty guns. Except for when we went into the ammunition dump. When we guarded that, they'd give us some ammunition. But otherwise, we didn't have any ammunition. Then after that high alert thing, would have been in 1966, then they started giving us a couple bullets when we went on guard duty, but they made us turn them back in. Excuse me, let me turn this off. So anyhow, we, sorry about that.
No problem.
But we never shot at anybody or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just kind of like we were watching them and they were watching us kind of deal. And we had about 5 Katusha soldiers in our company. And then there was rock soldiers that didn't live with us, but they would come every day. And they the rock soldiers kind of did the dirty work, you know, whatever hard work was to do. The Katusha soldiers, they worked with us, fixing trucks and tanks and whatever we worked on.
You met your friend Dennis, right? In the train.
On the train when we got off the boat.
But was he also in the Fort Knox, Kentucky?
No.
Where was he?
He was in Bellevue,
Virginia. Yeah.
And I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And then we both went to Oakland, California, got on a ship there. We did not meet on the ship, but when we got off the ship, then we ended up on the train in the same seat. 2 guys in each seat on this train. And it was an old steam engine train with wooden bench seats in it and stuff. And it didn't go very fast, but it chugged up the country. And so we got to kind of see country just looking out the windows, you know, and then it stopped, probably stopped in Seoul or something, because we landed in Incheon and then went up through that way.
Yeah, must be Seoul, yes.
And then, I'm not sure how far up it went, but we were, I think, east of Moonsani, about 15 miles. That's a pretty big village.
Yes.
So maybe it stopped there, because then they put us in trucks. We went to a processing company, because we had to still get a bunch of shots and stuff. And we were there a couple of days. And then they dispersed us to all these little bases. And we went to Camp Rice.
And, I mean, you didn't know him, but you met him through the Korean service, and now you are moved into Cody because of him. What do you think about this whole, it's kind of destiny.
Yeah, you know, when we left Korea, we both got stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, or
No, Texas.
And then we got discharged from there, and he had told me so much about this area that I was curious and I wanted to come see it. And so I came out here when I was still single and worked for a while. Then I went back to Wisconsin, and I met my wife, and I brought her out here on our honeymoon because I wanted to see this area, because I still had it in my head that I wanted to live here. And when she saw it, she loved it. So we made plans, and we saved and stuff for a couple of years, and then we moved out here, and we've been here ever since.
That's a wonderful story. We did interview the day before yesterday, Dennis, and then you were sitting beside him and you joined us later. So we have a pretty much good coverage about how you two become friends and how it evolved around, and you're still living together here. So
and our wives are best friends, and our children are friends, and you know, our kids are all grown now, and they're in their late 40s and early 50s, but some of them left this area, but they still stay in touch. They talk on the phone and stuff, you know.
Excellent.
So the families have just gotten along.
What was the most difficult thing during your service in Korea? If I ask you to just one, what would you say? What was the most difficult thing that you experienced there?
Well, I think You know, I kind of roll with everything, and I try to, wherever I am, I try to fit in. I think seeing the poverty was very difficult, because I'm kind of a compassionate guy. I don't want to see anybody go hungry or nothing, you know, and so that was hard to watch. I mean, you know, if you ask a private, you know, the sergeants drive you crazy and stuff, you know, I mean, as far as the military goes, but it was, you know, the food was terrible to get used to. Our food, and we were told not to eat in the villages, but quite frankly, I like some of your food over there, so I used to eat in the village sometimes. And I didn't drink the water, though. They had those old stagnant wells, and I just couldn't bring myself to drink their water. But the water we had so much chlorine in it, you almost had to chew it. You know, it was terrible. So, yeah, water wasn't a good thing over there. And
What did you like about Korean food?
Well, you know, I can't remember all the names of some of that stuff, but it was good. I liked it. I mean, I didn't like kimchi much. That never. I wasn't much of a vegetable eater anyhow when I was young. One of the guys in town here, he didn't interview with you, but he makes kimchi and gives it to us, and it's pretty good what he makes, you know. But and my wife and I went. My son was stationed in Hawaii when he was in the Marine Corps, and so for our 25th wedding anniversary, we went over to Hawaii to see him, and my daughter and her husband went with us, and so when we got over there, we went to the grocery store, and I was really surprised to see in the grocery store there was a whole big cooler full of kimchi, all different kinds of kimchi, and I thought only Koreans ate that. But it's, you know, it's more popular than I thought it was.
What about, did you work for kind of orphanage in Korea?
No, we just helped them a little bit.
Help them, how?
Well, with their buildings and stuff, you know, just supplies mostly. And then we do Christmas with them and try to give them some stuff at Christmas. You know, and have Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas dinners. We take food to there. And, you know, I don't know if they liked our food or not. I mean, it was different than their food, so hopefully they ate it. They'd eat anything they could get their hands on, you know, but...
Were you able to get out of the camp over the weekend or special holiday going to other cities in Korea while you were there?
You know, they had a floor show come to Korea, a Hello Dolly floor show. And it was in Seoul. So they trucked us all down there to go see that show. And so that's the only time I went to Seoul one time. And otherwise, I only was in the villages right in my area. And we would walk to those villages or catch a bus. There wasn't a lot of transportation there, so.
How was Seoul when you were there, just briefly?
Well, you know, it was a much bigger village than where I was based, but it still wasn't very big, and there was only, you know, around me there was only little grass huts, mud huts or whatever, hooches they call them, and they were just little tiny buildings. In Seoul, they actually had stories on their buildings, you know, like maybe 4 stories tall or something. But it wasn't much of a town either, and all the roads were dirt. And in our area, if you were driving down the road, 10, 15 miles an hour is all you could go. If you went 25 mile an hour, you almost go in the ditch because it was so bumpy and rough, you know. And everything was dirt. And the only transportation that the Korean people had was what we called kimchi buses. I don't know what you guys call them, but we called them kimchi buses, and they were They look like real homemade, all kinds of different things welded together for the body. And most of them were powered by a military truck engine or something. And there was a couple taxi cabs, but I don't know if they were local. They may have came out of Seoul or something. And there was one that came around once in a while. You could grab a taxi ride, but we usually just walked where we went. And we did go to a few of the other little bit bigger villages around the area, and I can't even remember the name of them. But Moonsani was like the next biggest village north of Seoul for us. But I only went there once or twice, and so we mainly just there. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of Korea, but Sanjuri was like the main village we went to. And right outside of our gate, there was a tiny little village called Panay. And I can't remember the name of the other villages, but you know, we just, and I would get to them because I had to go and service vehicles in some of the other villages.
Yeah.
Well, there was a base by every village, just about, a military base. And I would have to go to some of those other bases and maintain vehicles. And so I would drive around. I had a mobile shop that I worked out of, and we would go to other bases, and because some bases had just personnel carriers, and some bases were artillery bases. And our base had artillery on it, but we were the maintenance company in that area to take care of mostly trucks and jeeps and stuff, but we did some tank work.
Okay. How much were you paid actually at the time as a PFC?
As a PFC, I made $72 a month. As a private, I made $62 a month. And as a specialist, I made $216 a month.
$216.
Yeah, that was a big raise for me.
Absolutely, almost like a tripled, you know?
Yeah.
What did you do with that?
We went down to the village and spent it in the village.
You didn't save much?
I didn't save much when I was that age.
Okay.
I just partied.
So you did contribute to the Korean economy.
Yeah.
Did you wire some to your... You were single, right?
I was single, so
Yeah,
I didn't
so-
have anybody to wire money to. So,
Exactly.
I mean, what I carried in my pocket's about all I had, you know. And yeah, it was, you know, I enjoyed that experience over there. I was glad to come back to the States because it is a very poor atmosphere at that time. So it was nice to come back to the States, but I don't ever regret being there. I had a good experience there. And I liked the people, the ones I got to know. You know, we had what they called houseboys that took care of our laundry and stuff. They made our beds and washed our clothes and stuff. And you know, I liked those people, and I got along with the Korean soldiers that we worked with. So, you know, I don't know, I got to where I knew some of the villagers pretty good, you know, and in the shops and stuff, and so I got along pretty good over there. I didn't have any problem with that.
You saw the curriculum book that my foundation published with the National Council for Social Studies.
Yes.
And you agree with the idea that we need to work with the social studies teacher.
Yes.
So you introduced Jerry the other day, and we talked about, you know, see if this Cody area schools and social studies teachers wants to work with the sort of vision that we share together. So what do you think about it? I mean, where is the situation here in Cody? Are they really into the
Well, the state of Wyoming is a very patriotic state. The city of Cody is one of the most patriotic cities in this state.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I will stay communication with Jerry, and she does a big Veterans Day program, and the teachers ask us. We used to do it with the World War II guys, and then the Korean guys, and the Vietnam guys. Now we go to the schools once in a while, and they like us to bring any kind of memorabilia we have and share with them. And the kids, you know, they're especially the ones that go through Jerry's school. She has a school, kindergarten through 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6th, 7th, and 8th grade go to the middle school. And then we have 9th grade through 12th grade in the high school. And when my kids were in school, there was a Mr. Jones, Larry Jones. He was a very good history teacher. And he was good with the kids. The kids all liked him. And his son and my son were in the same class. And he taught a lot of history, and he taught Korean history because his father got killed in Korea.
Oh.
And so it was very close to his heart, you know. And
Yeah.
and so I asked him. For a couple of years, I was the commander of the VFW post here in Cody, and so I had him come on Veterans Day and do a program for us, and he told us how all the wars related, all the way from from before World War I all the way up, how World War II went right into the Korean War and stuff, and they were all connected.
Yes.
And I don't know if the Korean people at that time realized that how they were connected to World War II or not, but I know you do because you studied it, and you know all that history better than I do now. But he was very good at that, and he's since got Parkinson's disease, and he shakes a lot and everything. And I called to try to get him to interview with you because I thought he would be very interested.
Yeah, you talk about it.
But I couldn't get a hold of him,
Yeah,
so I don't know.
Maybe later, but average age of the Korean War veteran is close to 90 now.
Yes.
And in 5 to 10 years, there will be no Korean War veterans whatsoever because we are all limited,
Yes.
And timed. My opinion, and I think you absolutely agree with me that the legacy of the Korean War, their honorable service, and the direct witness of what they saw in Korea, and now the real great transformation, all this legacy has to be in the hands of the social and history teachers so that our young generations continue to learn about what's been done. We're not promoting the war, but we want them to know what happened to Korea and between U.S. and Korea relationship, and why does that matter? Because still there are odds and conflict between China and the U.S., and there are still problems with North Korea, right?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yes, and when I was the commander of the VFW, I also was the chairman of the educational program. And we had the Voice of Democracy and the Patriot Pin program for the middle school and high school kids to participate in. And so at that time, I was pretty involved with the teachers and the programs. And so we do, and we've had some of the kids win at national levels those programs. So that it gets taught in our schools. And we try to keep that alive through the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And my grandkids, I never got my granddaughter to write an essay, but I got my grandson to write an essay when he was, I think he was in the 7th grade, and he won first place.
Ah.
And he lives in Billings, Montana.
What is it about?
they have, well, he wrote about the Korean, my experiences and stuff in Korea. He did
There you
that.
go. Yes.
And then they both put in in the Korean War magazine, there's scholarships available, and they both won scholarships. My
Excellent.
granddaughter and my grandson. My granddaughter won 2. My grandson won 1. And the only reason he might not have won the other one is he writes sloppy, and they couldn't read his writing that good, and he should have printed it, you know, or he should have typed it. But anyhow, he learned his lessons from sloppy
Excellent.
writing.
Yeah.
But he's now going to Georgetown
Yeah.
University in D.C.
For law school.
for law school, and he majored in political science just
Excellent.
like you did. So,
Yeah.
and he's got 2 majors. He did a communication one too, in case he ever gets into broadcasting or something. But anyhow, he's very interested in that stuff too.
So I think it is imperative for the honor and legacy of the Korean War veterans that you respect, that we need to work with history teachers here in Cody and vicinity of Cody. Would you be willing to work with my foundation?
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah.
I find you to be a very interesting person. I've enjoyed your company.
Thank you very
I
much.
met Hannah Kim,
Yeah?
and she was very, very nice and very helpful. And you know, she met all of our our Korean War veterans. We had quite a few yet then when she was here.
Mhm.
A lot of them passed away since she left.
Mm.
But she still stays in touch with me once in a while. And we've had other ambassadors from your country come over and stuff. And so every once in a while,
Yeah.
somebody comes in like yourself. And
So let's work on the history teachers, because otherwise it's all going to be buried sooner or later. We need to put that into curriculum, we need to put that into a text and lesson plan. And my foundation has a program inviting social studies and history teachers back to Korea every year. We were not able to do this year because of the COVID-19,
right.
but we will resume this next year. So I would like to see applications from Wyoming too. All right?
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. As a Korea defense veteran, what is you think that you did contributed to the relationship with Korea?
Well, I guess I was a small fish in the big sea there, you know. What I personally did, you know, we just helped maintain the military, and you know, privates and PFCs and specialists and stuff, they just do the work. And then the higher echelon people, they make the decisions and they do the communications with your country people. And I don't always agree with what they do, and I'm sure you don't either. And I, you know, I mean, until you walk in their shoes, I guess you really can't know exactly everything that went on behind the scene to make them make their decisions. And hindsight is always better than foresight. You know, I mean,
Yep.
you just you know when you made a mistake, you wish you'd have done something different. But I think most people try to do the best they can moving forward, and you never know until after you see the results of that, whether you did right or wrong, you know. And sometimes there's a decision made that might not be the best for some people, but maybe the overall picture it's the best, you know. You just don't know.
I absolutely agree with you.
It's so hard, and you'll never please everybody.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't do that. There's too many human...
Too many variables.
Yeah, everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah.
You know? And so hopefully, you know, we just do the best we can for everybody that we come in touch with.
Excellent.
And I, you know, I got to tell you, you asked me how my grandson got a scholarship at George Washington or at Georgetown, and when he graduated, they didn't have a graduation ceremony at his university, so my daughter had one at her home, and had everybody there, so we celebrated his graduation. She asked me to be the commencement speaker, you might call it, you know. And so I talked at the group, you know. And then my grandson got up and he told me he had to, when he won he was an all-state champion, All-American, All-American champion debate team person in college. And he had to write an essay on something to finalize winning that title. And he did it on me.
Again.
And my experiences in Korea and stuff. And I thought, unbelievable. You will never think your grandkids or your kids pay attention to you, you know? And that was quite an honor that he wrote a story about his grandpa that helped him win All-American honors at his college level. And then because of all that, he got a scholarship at Georgetown, a real good one. So
that's legacy of Korea defense veteran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and who would have thought, you know, I didn't know there was even scholarships like that until I looked in the magazine, you know, and saw that things were offered. And your country, you know, you said you give aid to other countries. You do more than just aid, because our country doesn't need aid, but your country gives to our country. You helped us build our monuments here. You're given to the monument in D.C. and stuff.
It was done by MPVA, Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs.
See, I mean, you do more than just help the needy. You know, you're trying to educate the world, because if everybody was better educated, let's face it, there would be less wars and stuff.
Exactly.
And
you made a point.
Yeah, you know, and there's always been wars, and there probably always will be wars. But all we can do is all we can do. We just got to keep trying.
I know you are ready to go to your hometown, Wisconsin, so I don't want to hold you up too long. We have already been spending more than an hour, but I have to ask this question for sure. This is the year of 70th anniversary of the breakout of the Korean War, 1950. And you've been there and you served there. You are the president of your chapter in Cody. You know Korean War veteran. What would you say to the Korean people in the context of 70-year-old war?
I would say thank you for working so hard to take care of yourselves and to grow into being a very successful country. I think that is the biggest honor you could give any of the countries that helped you during the war, is to be successful yourself.
Excellent point.
You know, I mean, that warms my heart to know. I tell you, when I watched the Olympics last year, I watched the background. I like watching the Olympics. I like watching sports.
Yeah.
But that particular Olympics, I spent more time watching the background, trying to see your country, than I focused on the Olympics itself, because I was excited to see. You have big trees there and stuff now. The hills were all covered with trees, you know, by their ski hills.
Not like a big home, but...
You know, I mean, it was really heartwarming to see that. I congratulate you guys on the wonderful job you did with your country. I wish North Korea could do the same thing.
That's the thing, that we really need to put a closer on it.
I would like to see that 38th parallel go away and you all be one happy country there.
Excellent.
That would be wonderful.
You said in the beginning that there are so many Jack Martins, so you have to put your middle initial there, R, right?
Yes.
You are my first Jack Martin, okay? And will be forever. I want to thank you for your service for the Korean people. Thank you for wonderful arrangement here and wonderful time with your family, your wife Diane, and your people, Bob, Dennis, and Jerry. Hyunjin, the Korean woman that we met here, this is going to be my memory to last forever. And I want to thank you again for your service and your leadership as a president of Korean War Veterans Association in Cody. And I hope that our vision will have more to harvest. Would you?
Yes.
Alrighty. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.